Tonight's topic, they asked me to talk regarding total surrendering. We hear a lot about the word surrender, but what does it really mean? Tonight we are going to reflect about how to surrender to God and letting go of our plans and letting God to have His way in every aspect of our lives, allowing Him to guide our steps and direct our decisions. This means we surrender our very own will for His perfect will. Full surrender to God means that we are not meant to keep certain parts back, but surrendering our whole life to Him in an act of obedience and complete trust. This means that we are called to turn over every aspect of our lives to God's control, every day, moment by moment to God. I wanted to share about Saint Louis Marie de Montfort, who left us a wonderful gift of the total consecration to Jesus through Mary, because it is giving oneself fully and completely to God, without conditions, without strings, without reservation. We are giving back to God freely of our own will, the very gift of our life. It is truly our ultimate possession, which we recognize fully as a gift from God our Father. Hence, we return this gift in total surrender to the will of our Father, to be used daily for His purpose. This also includes the surrendering of all our sufferings, thoughts, words, and deeds to Mary, so she may take them, care for them, and distribute them in accordance with the will of her Son and for His greater glory. Now, surrendering to God through prayer, it is really important that we spend time in prayer, because it is the first step when it comes to know how to surrender to God and to let go. It means letting go and letting God. Because in prayer, it changes our perspective as it shifts our focus to our Creator instead to ourselves. In prayer, we place our plans before Him as we seek direction, allowing God to lead us. Waiting is important. Sometimes when we are trying to figure out how to surrender to God and to let go of our plans, we forget that we need to wait on God. We can't just throw up a prayer, get some advice, or charge ahead. We need to be in step with God so that not only did we seek Him in the planning, but also in the timing. While we are in the waiting stages of surrender, focused on the prayer and spending time with the Lord. If you feel let down by God, remember that like Jesus on the cross, we too must endure painful times. Prayer reminds us to rely on Him. The silence of God when you need Him most is one of the most difficult mysteries of a person's faith will ever have to face. Yes, prayer works, and we absolutely need to rely on the Lord's strength when troubles come. But many of us lose confidence in God's love when He doesn't do exactly what we want. Jesus felt this emotion on the cross when He cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Divine wisdom is beyond our comprehension. For instance, God takes a loved ones home to heaven at a time that is best for them, but not necessarily at a time that is best for us. We should at least have the grace to acknowledge that the diseased person may be much happier with God. Prayer allows us to seek His will, allowing our plans and goals in life to be lined up with God's plan. Let God direct our path because He has a plan for us and no step along our journey has been missed. Trust Him and surrender our plans before Him. Remain trusting even when we are not getting our way. When we seek His will, we are giving up our own agendas, giving up trying to do everything in our own strength, and just saying to God, Your will be done. In the words in Proverbs, it says, Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. Surrendering and letting go is never going to be easy. Our natural instincts urge us to move on with our plans and our own timetable. Sometimes we make a plan assuming that it's God's and try to force Him into it. But this isn't surrender and can only end in pain, frustration, and heartbreak. These are the words that we often don't like to hear. Surrender and accept. Surrender because we are not in charge. Perhaps hearing the word surrender makes us hear the word weak. But of course we are weak. It's God who makes us strong. By surrendering, all we're doing is gaining strength. All we have to lose is our pride. Surrendering is giving a situation over to God in exchange for His power. We can surrender our friendship to Him and see Him work through our relationships. For example, as a husband and a wife, a parent or to a child. Or we can surrender the situations that makes us cry, and God will cry with us. At Fatima, Lucia's question at each apparition of Our Lady, "What do you want of me?" reveals an eagerness of heart that can be ours in seeking the will of God. To surrender our life to God is an acknowledgement that we are human and we often fail, but that with God all things are possible. It is not a sign of weakness, rather a sign of maturity and strength to be able to lift our hands in prayer with a heart full of faith and hope, and to submit to a Father who loves us unconditionally. Accept that we cannot control life. Life is consequential and time runs out for all of us. As we move on into the future, we try to keep the faith, believing in God's love no matter what. Despite God's silence, may we have the courage to surrender to God our life as it presents itself. Accept the sadness, but reject the thoughts of anger and desolation, because they will only sabotage our happiness. On the 13th of May 1917, Our Lady said, "Are you willing to offer yourselves to God and bear all the sufferings He wills to send you as an act of reparation for the sins by which He is offended, and of supplication for the conversion of sinners?" When God calls someone to a mission in His plan of salvation, He never forces him to accept it. He always asks for his free, loving, and generous consent. When the Archangel Gabriel presented God's message to Our Lady at the Annunciation, he invited her to accept freely God's will. In a similar way, Our Lady Fatima desired the children to give their free, loving consent to God's plan in their own lives. With great enthusiasm, the children responded, "Yes, we are willing." According to one of my favorite saints, Saint Teresa of Child Jesus, on surrender and abandonment, when she was asked about explanation on the path she would want to teach souls after her death, Therese responded, "It's the way of spiritual childhood. It's the way of confidence and total abandonment." This is the pleasant aspect of abandonment, the trust of the child, and it is equally challenging that all our struggles, works, our daily duties, sacrifices are done out of love. I repeat, all our sacrifices, our daily duties, and struggles are done out of love. And Our Lady taught us this beautiful prayer, the sacrifice prayer, on the 13th of July, 1917. The trust of the child, which means surrendering, it also means trusting. And when we pray, "Jesus, I trust in you," it meant to be an active prayer. When we are in a difficult situations and we become anxious, instead of choosing our own will, we try to let go of our concerns, placing them in the Lord's capable hands. When we pray, "Jesus, I trust in you," we're not simply seeking His advice to carry out our own plans in the best way possible. Remember, brothers and sisters, God is in control. When we pray, "Jesus, I trust in you," but are inclined to continue to be anxious and to fret, we need to practice putting the prayer into action. We can deliberately redirect our thoughts, choosing to be grateful for our blessings in the present moment. When we pray, "Jesus, I trust in you," we can't expect that things will work out exactly the way we want, but we need to have that expectant faith that He will work all things for good. We need to be humble and docile and remain open to His best plan for us and for His divine will. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus prayed, "Your will be done." Right before Jesus was betrayed and turned over to endure the agonies of the cross and drink the cup of God's wrath, He prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane and He said, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done. Jesus understandably did not want to drink the cup of God's wrath. That experience was not a delight. But Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane provides an example of what it means to surrender our own desires and to trust that God's will is ultimately better than any plans we might devise on our own. In short, praying for God's will to be done means subjugating our own will or desires in order to act according to God's will. In the Gospel of John, Jesus stated, "I seek not my own will, but the will of Him who sent me." Looking for God's will to be done on earth was a way of life for Jesus. And at Fatima, Our Lady reveals that it is God's will. It is not Our Lady's wish. It is God's will to establish devotion to her Immaculate Heart. Can she count on us, her loving children, to make her known and loved, and to establish in the world devotion to her Immaculate Heart? May God be praised. Ave Maria.